Hi, everybody. Welcome to Moving Markets. My name is Jeffry Dunyon, owner and founder of Safe Option Strategies. Glad to have you here on a Thursday. Today is May the 30th, one day left in the month of May. Fantastically horrible month for the stock market. Sell in May and go away. That's the term that gets thrown around once in a while for the month of May, and it certainly seems to be true for this month. Historically, May is one of the worst months in the market, and it's certainly proven to be the case this time around. As we know, as you're already aware, if you're a regular listener, we did not have a podcast from yesterday. Had some volunteer work going on yesterday. It took a little bit longer than I expected, and by the time I was free from that, the day was over. It was past an opportunity to do that. So yesterday, Dow Jones started to the downside, and it continued to sell off throughout the day after Robert Mueller came out and made some pretty stupid comments. The market took another drop down, and then Nancy Pelosi went on TV and made some more comments that are pretty nonsensical, and that caused the markets to drop down another leg. And at one point in time, the Dow was down 350 points, and then towards the very end of the day, maybe the last 30, 40 minutes, the Dow rebounded pretty strong, still finished down over 220 points on the day. But, it rallied back, I think, almost 150 points. At one point in time, it was down. This is going into the close. At one point in time, it was down a little bit less than 200 points when you consider where it started and where it spent most of the day. That was a little bit of a reprieve, but it didn't last. Fell back down. I think 222 was the official close on the Dow yesterday. NASDAQ and S&P, similar drops. The markets continue to get beat up, and they continue to get beat up on no brand new news, but the media, and this is all the media. This is not one news station. This is not one network. This is not only the liberal media, only the conservative media. If there's conservative media is basically Fox News and public radio. And I don't mean NPR. I don't mean National Public Radio. I mean just radio. But it's this constant, nonstop harping on everything that's going wrong, which is what the news has always done. That's not even a liberal or conservative thing. That's not something that's new to this era. Certainly, the vitriol has increased. Certainly, there's more bad blood between the political parties than there has ever been. The media has become less trusted by the American people than at any time in their history. I mean, by far and away, there's never been a time in the history of the free press where the media has been more distrusted or mistrusted than they are right now. There are polls that come out on a regular basis that show that something like 18 or 20% of the public actually trust the media to report accurately on things. So yeah, it's a pretty horrible situation when you can't rely on what is supposed to be an unbiased media to present the facts. 90% of what gets reported now is opinion reporting, and it's passed off as journalism. It's anything but. But what you've got going on is this nonstop focus on the negatives, and no one wants to do news and focus on the good things that are going on with the economy. And when it does occasionally get brought up, when it does occasionally get mentioned, it's oftentimes in the context of, we got these good numbers on housing starts, but it's not as good as the numbers were the month before, and that could be a sign that the sky is falling. Or unemployment is down at historic lows, but it can't go down any farther, and this China trade war is going to cause companies to have mass layoffs. And every piece of good news is reported with a but, and the focus of time is spent on the negative news. And there's no question, there's absolutely no question that the trade war going on with China, it's going to hurt. It's going to have a negative effect, and that's not something you can get away from. Your choices are ride through the pain and trust that you come out better on the other side. And that's what the president is hoping for. That's what his administration are hoping for. They're hoping that the economic pain that this will cause to China is going to be greater than the economic pain that it causes for the United States, that we can ride things out, and that ultimately China will come back to the table and negotiate something, and we can come up with some type of a trade deal that is a more level playing field and a more fair playing field. The alternative is to go back to what China has been doing. And I imagine there are some people that would be okay with that and would be satisfied with that. But there are a lot of U.S. companies that are not. There are a lot of U.S. companies, especially those in the technology field, that are sick and tired and fed up with the way China continually rips them off. So it's a tough spot to be in. I for one say we stay the course. We see this thing through to the end, and if it gets a little bit tough for consumers, if it gets a little bit tough for the market, it's, so be it. It's what's probably going to happen, and I personally am okay with that. There are other people who are very against that, and then there are those who oppose just for the sake of opposing. They don't have a reason for opposing the tariffs. They don't have a reason for opposing Trump policies. They just oppose because it's Donald Trump, and that's, to me, that's ridiculous. I'm not suggesting that I'm perfect in this. I'm not suggesting that I'm some kind of a saint or that I'm somehow enlightened over other people. But there was nothing that I liked about Bill Clinton as a president. There was nothing that I liked about Barack Obama as a president. But I didn't have a problem giving them credit for things they deserved credit for. Bill Clinton, when he was president, he started out and put Hillary in charge of trying to figure out if they could do a makeover on the healthcare system, and it failed miserably. It went nowhere. People saw it for what it was, and it was an absolute disaster. When that happened, and when Newt Gingrich did his contract with America, and for the first time in some time, the Republicans took back the House of Representatives, and they took it back with some pretty big margins. It was a major political blow to Clinton, even more so than Trump. Same thing happened 2 years into Trump's presidency. The first midterm election, he got shellacked. The Republicans lost a whole bunch of seats in the House. Democrats picked up a whole bunch of seats, and it may force Trump to do some things different. So far, he's been resistant to doing that. But I'm not afraid to give Bill Clinton credit for moving to the middle on a whole bunch of stuff. He moved to the middle on crime legislation. He moved to the middle on welfare reform. That's something that a lot of people have been afraid to do. I'm not afraid to give someone credit where they deserve credit. One thing I'll tip my hat to Bill Clinton for, in spite of the fact that he's a sleazeball, that he's an absolute scumbag, that he preyed on young women and girls, and is a sexist and a pervert. He kind of stayed out of the way of the economy. He didn't put in place policies that were detrimental to the movement and the growth of the economy, and so the economy surged through the late 1990s. I can't think of anything Barack Obama did policy-wise that was a good thing. He was pretty much a disaster as a president. I'll give him credit for being, what's the word I'm looking for? He admittedly, I would say he sort of behaved more presidential. I kind of hate to say that. Not because I don't want to give him credit. He kind of had a dignified sense about him. Whether you disliked his policies or not, and I pretty much disliked every single policy he put out. From my political standpoint, from my viewpoint, he was a flat out disaster as a president. But he didn't offend people. Generally speaking, he had kind of that polish and sort of that reserved demeanor. That made it easy for him to get along with people. Probably speaks largely to why he was able to get through any of his policies. He's a smooth talker, a blatant liar, and got a free pass by the media constantly for lies and crap that he put out. But look, I'm not afraid to also criticize a Republican or a conservative president when they do things I don't like. A lot of things I like about George Bush, but the man did nothing to curb spending. He was the most spend-happy Republican I think we've ever had in the White House in the history of the country. There wasn't a bill that came across his desk that involved spending money that he wasn't willing to put his signature on. He signed an education bill with Ted Kennedy I really think for the sake of looking like he could work across the aisle and looking like he could get along with both parties. And it was a disaster. It was a huge overreach by the federal government into public education, and it was expensive. It was crazy, over the top expensive. So I'm not afraid to criticize that when it goes on, but I try not to criticize just because a person exists in another party and just hate everything they do when there's no basis behind it. There's just too much of that going on in Washington, D.C. right now. There are too many people that will look past the logic, the sound economics of a good policy, and they'll oppose it just because it's Donald Trump that's putting it forth. And that's asinine. That is so childish. I mean, that's just the political environment that we live in right now, unfortunately. I got off on a tangent on that, which is, easy for me to do most of the time. But the bottom line is this: I kind of hope we stay the course, even if we take a hit short term. I kind of hope we stay the course. I don't want to go back to the status quo of China ripping off U.S. companies on a regular basis and doing it blatantly. I talked a little bit 2 days ago, the last time I was on the air. I talked a little bit about China's manipulation of currency, and how their manipulation of currency is one of the things that kind of gets overlooked. And then I heard yesterday, and I hadn't considered this, that a lot of U.S. companies right now, the reason costs are not so far being passed on to the consumer because of the trade wars that are going on with China. And it will eventually come. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but so far there hasn't been a lot of pass along to the consumer in terms of the cost of the trade wars and the trade tariffs. And that's because of the strength of the U.S. dollar. Right now, the U.S. dollar is gaining strength, and it has been steadily gaining strength against the Chinese, whatever they call their dollar over there. I don't remember what it is, but our dollar has been gaining strength, and what that means is that part of the increased price in tariffs is being offset directly, very directly, by the fact that the rate of exchange is in the favor of the United States if they're bringing products over from China. Between that and the wiggle room that's built into the margins on most manufactured products, there has been not as big an impact to the consumer right out of the gate on the Chinese tariffs. That will change. I think where tariffs are hurting the U.S. more than anything else, or the trade war. Let me say this. I think where the trade war is hurting the U.S. more than anywhere else is that there are contracts from China to buy agricultural goods from the United States, and the tariffs that they impose on the farmers that are shipping the goods over there, and vice versa. Those definitely hurt. But what hurts more is that China is now giving these contracts to other countries, and those are not automatically going to come back. See, here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about these tariffs and about trade wars. If let's say hypothetically, and I'm optimistic, I hope this happens. I'm not unrealistic. I don't believe it's going to happen. Let's say hypothetically, we get a week or two into June, and the president announces that we're back at the negotiating table with China. We've worked out some differences. We've discovered that it's in the interest of both countries, to have this trade war over with. And they, maybe we don't get quite as good a deal as we want on something, and they're willing to give up a few things, so they're not getting quite as rosy a deal as what they've had in the past. And it looks like a deal is going to get signed. When it comes to companies like Nike that have a lot of shoes manufactured there, when it comes to companies like Apple that have the iPhone made over there, when it comes to other U.S. companies that have their product made over there and shipped over here, because the manufacturing plants are set up, because the infrastructure for the making of those products is all in place and all set up, chances are it stays there. Now, there might still be some lingering effect of the tariffs, and some companies that may have started the process of shipping some of their manufacturing out of China Maybe they're far enough down that road that they finish the process. Maybe they're far enough along that they say, okay, we've got a plant being built for us right now in the Philippines. We're gonna allow that plant to finish being constructed, and our widget is going to be made in the Philippines beginning in 2020. There may be some of that goes on, but there's a lot of business that China could lose that would be easy for them to hang on to if we get a deal done. In fact, it'll be really easy for them to hang on to if we get a deal done. When you lose a contract to buy soybeans, when you lose a contract to buy corn, when you lose a contract to buy pork product, bacon, pigs, when you lose these contracts and China goes to Brazil, or China goes to Mexico, or China goes to India or someplace else for these agricultural products, you may not get those contracts back anytime soon. If a country like Brazil can fulfill China's needs for soybeans, and China's not placing a tariff on soybeans coming over to their country, what reason would they have to come back to the U.S. for those contracts? It's not like Brazil has never planted and produced and grown soybeans, so it's not the same as going out and building a plant. These soybean, I'm just using soybeans as one example, but these soybeans are, these contracts are purchased out in time, and it's far easier to level a piece of ground, plow it up, plant some soybeans, and have a crop for the next harvest than it is to build a manufacturing plant that's now going to assemble iPhones and start shipping them. So that's where the U.S. consumer and that's where the U.S. economy risks the biggest hit, is in the agricultural business. When it comes to electronics, price of things might go up a little bit. We might have a few jobs come back to America. We might start having, U.S. companies might start having products manufactured in other places in the world, and that's going to hurt China. And if China doesn't come to the table, that's going to hurt them enough. When other countries see the United States successfully doing this, they're going to follow suit. They're going to say, why are we getting ripped off with our intellectual property? Why are we getting ripped off with the forced forfeiture of technology? Why are we getting stung by currency manipulation? The U.S. a lot of U.S. companies were successful in getting their products manufactured in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in India, in Vietnam. Those are the countries that get brought up the most. I think you're going to see more and more African nations, African countries that get in on that. You're going to see some of the places where the governments are more stable, that have huge potential labor pools. And this doesn't have to be real highly skilled labor. There's a shorter training curve. There's a shorter training time to teach someone how to run a sewing machine so that a t-shirt can be sewn together than the training time involved in an engineer that's got to come up with a new product, or with a chemist that's going to be working on drugs and stuff like that. So they aren't they're needed. They're an important part of a global economy, but they're not really highly skilled labor jobs. And you've got some of these African nations that are very depressed economically right now, that would have an absolute boon, if a company like Nike started having their shoes and their workout clothing manufactured in Uganda, I think Zimbabwe is one of the more unstable ones right now. But if you had South Africa doing more of it, if you had some of the other African countries where the governments are more stable, there's some countries over there that are in total chaos and they're ruled by warlords, and you can't move into a company like that because it would be a detriment. But if other countries see it working for the U.S., they're going to start following suit. They're going to start doing the same thing. But there's going to be some pain in the short run. The markets really have been moving for an entire month on the fear of these trade wars more than anything else. It's been the fear of these trade wars and the and the probability that this goes on a little bit longer and lasts a little bit more than people would like. So that's where we are. I didn't do it at the beginning of the program, so let me do it. This is the next to the last day that we're going to give a shout out to all of our friends, all the family members of people who are serving or have served in the U.S. Armed Forces and all branches of the Armed Forces. We include in that, and I kind of think that the U.S. should maybe make more of a concerted effort to recognize this and either make it a part of the Memorial Day holiday or create a separate holiday that is specifically and exclusively for police officers and firefighters who have lost their lives in the line of duty specifically. But until that happens, we're giving a shout out also to the men and women in blue and the men and women in red who are out there fighting hard to protect us and keep us safe and rescue us when we need it. So for the military, for all those men and women that serve in these other capacities, from myself, from Moving Markets podcast, and from Safe Option Strategies, my company, thank you very much. Tomorrow will be kind of our final salute to that. Not that we're not always grateful, but we just want to take the entire month that Memorial Day is in and talk about that. So I'm going to wrap up right there. Hope everybody has a great day as we end. The Dow has managed to hold on to gains, only up 26 points. It's dipped negative a couple of times, but not an ugly day like yesterday was. Today's stayed mostly positive, just not very much, kind of a flat day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.